on the cloud. Good evening and welcome to the March 28th, 2022 public board meeting for the Kingston City Land Bank. My name is Mike Gilliard. I serve as the executive director of the organization. We do ask that members of the public limit their comments during the two public speaking sessions to no more than 2 minutes per speaker. Thank you all and welcome. With that, I'll turn it over to Daniel Cantor, our board chair.
Thank you, Sid. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our March 2022 board meeting. Lots to get through. First, let's do the very exciting roll call. So board members, please, when you're called, name yourself and your physical location from which you are taking this meeting. So my name is Daniel Cantor. I am at 142 Clinton Avenue in Kingston. Jeannie.
Jeannie Edwards, board meeting, and it's nice to be here tonight.
Oh, Jeannie, you have to list your physical location. It's part of the weird open meetings law. Jeannie.
And you're coming in and out.
Oh, you have to list where you're taking the meeting from. If you're at home, just your physical address. It's part of the open meetings law stuff now. I'm not sure. Maybe let's circle back. Bob.
I'm Robert Dennison, and I'm at 122 Wilson Avenue in Kingston, New York. Beautiful Kingston, New York.
Minya.
Minya DeJohnette, 258 Main Street, Kingston, New York.
Bartek.
Bartek Stardai, 354 South Wall Street in Kingston.
And Aaron.
Aaron Chilowich, 75 Madison Avenue, Kingston, New York.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. Few announcements. Some of you know I've been sort of underwater on a challenging and unexpected personal thing this past month or so. So if you're waiting on an email response from me or something, I will get to it. And I apologize for being a little out of the loop, but I'm trying to take care of some stuff. So construction, where we don't have Owen tonight. He's on a much deserved vacation. So I'll give construction updates. Greenkill is coming along beautifully with Mida Contracting, who we worked with on 64 Van Buren and is also our development partner for the Legacy Cities program. They have, I believe, passed all inspections up to the final one that will happen probably in June, I would think, May. They're moving. So yeah, it's a nice time to stop in if you'd like. The floors were just refinished. They look lovely. The house is really coming together beautifully. So that's great. Meanwhile, over on Franklin, things have been moving along slightly differently. So Owen has been great at shepherding this through. We currently, I believe, have an RFP out for replacing the roof on that building, but we've done a significant amount of demo work. We've replaced the water, the sewer, upgraded the electrical service. I believe windows have been ordered. We did not let it stop us that we didn't get a great bid the first time around. So we're gearing up to release another RFP, I believe, for completing that building, but we've done a significant amount of work in the meantime. So that's good. And otherwise, over on 111 Downs, we have an RFP, or is it an RFP or just bids? We're gathering bids through some mechanism to fix the garage, which has been a very long time issue on that property. DPW threw a tarp over it years ago. And so now that we own it, we would like to take care of that for the neighborhood. So we're pricing both fixing it and demolishing it. I think it is likely that we will fix it, but that'll go to acquisition, disposition, and construction at our next meeting, I think, for a recommendation, I think. Otherwise, we all have bios up on the website now. Thank you, Mike, for getting that done, and everybody for submitting theirs. Speaking of board members, we are short one. Julie Whalen, who served only for a couple of months as a board member, unfortunately had to resign due to changing circumstances in her life. However, some of you know that Julie started volunteering for the land bank back in October or so, just basically as a groovy community member who wanted to help, and helped us pull off the ribbon cutting event over at Van Buren and various other kind of fundraising things. So we owe her a debt of gratitude, and wish her all the best for her next chapter. Legacy City stuff is moving along well. I'm sure Mike has more updates on that, but from my end, working with our architects, Liscombe, McCormick, Van, LMV is what we've been calling them. It's an exotic sounding name. They have been a joy to work with, really, really responsive, really fast. And it's really helping keep this moving as quickly as it needs to be moving to meet these deadlines. So that's been great. So we have four of the 5 houses plans are approved and moving to their structural and stuff to firm them up. And then one of them, we're just sort of wrapping up the design phase on. So it's going really well. It's great. In the past month / over the past 3 years, we have worked pretty hard to try to work better with the city of Kingston in terms of how these property acquisitions work and when they happen, and cleaning up the foreclosure process so that they can happen, and on and on and on. But it's so it's been a very long-term effort. But in the past month, we met with Council Member Scott Childress and Council Member Mohammed, as well as the mayor and John Toohey, which I think was before our last board meeting, maybe. But it feels like we're kind of finally getting some traction and support on a proposal that actually makes this work. And so that's very cool. So the basic gist of it is that the land bank would pay the city for properties basically on the back end based on the affordability that we're able to achieve with them. So we did assign specific numbers. However, I'm guessing those numbers might change. So we've gotten wholehearted support from Rennie and Naima, the council members that we've been working with on this. They feel good about supporting it to the council and introducing it to the council. The mayor and John Toohey have some additional questions and concerns, which we are happy to entertain. So we're trying to set a meeting with them to revise the plan a little bit, and it'll go back and forth a little bit, but I think we're likely, it would be really nice to get this in before the deadline, but that's the end of the week. I'm not sure that's going to happen. Mike and I talked about it first thing this morning, like, I don't know, but we're gonna try. If it doesn't, listen, it's been 3.5 years. If it has to wait a month, it will wait a month and it'll still be fine, because good ideas win out. So that's cool and good and exciting. And I think lastly, there was a meeting discussing the proposed plan for the ARPA funds that the city of Kingston received. And that includes, I think, $1 million and change for the land bank, which was very exciting for us to hear about, along with the rest of the public when we found out. And so it was very, very heartening that we got a lot of support from the council. I think most or all council members spoke in favor of our work. And So obviously call your council member, ask for their support as as they push toward approving this proposal. But it seems like people are noticing we're like doing a good job and stuff. So that's great. So I think that's kind of it for me. We always have a public comment period. We ask that comments are limited to 2 minutes per speaker. So I'll open the floor. Anybody from the public, feel free to jump in. Okay, thank you. We're gonna skip that then. And Mike, your executive director's report.
My executive director's report is as follows. So again, welcome to everyone who is here. It's very nice to see everyone. Following my comments, we will have, as is on the agenda and in your board package, a presentation by Forsyth Street Advisors for this very exciting and timely Kingston Housing Opportunity Fund. So I'm very excited about that. Just going down the list, talking about pre-development, trying not to repeat some of the things that Daniel has said, just to echo pieces of it. We did, as Daniel mentioned, meet with the city on the 22nd of February. And then we're trying to get something working with the council and the comptroller and the mayor to be brought to the council president by this Thursday at noon. I agree does feel like a bit of a stretch, but if not, we will try again next month. But I wanted to give a shout out to Kyle for pulling together very quickly a financial scenario, a tool that actually allows some very real-time conversations to take place. So if our purchase price is this, what does that mean? I think it's a very effective piece of the communication inside of City Hall that they were hoping to see, so we could have that kind of dialogue in a more informed manner. So that has been submitted to the mayor, and hopefully we get some feedback on that. And just for context, in February when we met, the mayor did estimate possibly that the Kingston City Land Bank could be acquiring up to 12 new properties this year. So that's the bottom line for what we're working towards, and I remain excited to believe that a framework will come into place relatively shortly. Also under pre-development, we have eight properties total that are working through that process. 5 are legacy cities. My big update this month is that earlier this week, we received bank credit approval. So we have a term sheet from the bank, which is a big first step towards getting ready to have the closing. We, as Daniel mentioned, are moving rapidly with the architect towards having their drawings completed by the 15th of April. And I want to give a shout out to Daniel and Owen for their constant patience and diligence and endless attention to detail to get those in a state that is both buildable and sensitive to design concerns and realistic, and make some great houses. And it requires everybody firing on all cylinders to get this done over the next 2 weeks. So I really appreciate it, Daniel. You've been more than heavily involved day and night in this whole process, and it shows. So the next steps in legacy cities would be that the state would take this to their board, I believe in May, and we would be following up with a closing in June. So that's my update on the legacy cities. Moving down to the 6th house in our pre-development pipeline, 6th property rather. It is a vacant piece of land at 151 3rd. Last month, I told you I was hoping to have the one remaining title issue, which is a summary judgment from 10 years ago, removed. I have not been able to be successful in that. The process is somewhat frustrating in that you need to track down and have conversations with people whose names, in this case, have changed and who are more difficult to find, and you have to engage in them to try to resolve this lien. So that's the one remaining piece, to have that property be free and clear so that we can take possession of it, so we can then finance it, so we can then sell it to families who don't have any title issues on the properties, because that's what we do with all of our properties. So I hope to have more updates. The certified letters have gone out. I hope to hear back. So to be continued next month on that. And as Daniel mentioned, 111 Downs, possibly under consideration for Legacy Cities Part 2 or TBD, as is now following the board's decision last month at 108 110 Henry. I think it's safe to say that's somewhat in the same category as far as TBD or possibly Legacy Cities Part 2. So construction updates, I think Daniel will jump in at the ADC portion, maybe with any questions or more broad updates, but thank you to Owen and Daniel for keeping 149 Greenkill. I believe the CO date, the certificate of occupancy date, is still the end of June. I know it has not moved. So we're working on a June-July date to have the certificate of occupancy for that building. And as Daniel mentioned, at 124 Franklin, the goal is to rebid it with a general contractor next month. And there is in the board package an estimated schedule for what that would look like, but ultimately we would be jumping down to sales updates. We'd be marketing Greenkill first, probably in May. The new AMIs will be published in April. That allows us to finalize our pricing. There's some updates at ADC around setting the level for that pricing in terms of AMI. So I won't step on that. Following Franklin, we would then be marketing probably the first tranche of Legacy Cities homes. So I'm guessing that's probably 3 of the 5 homes, probably early next year is when that marketing campaign begins. So we have Greenkill, followed by Franklin, followed by Legacy Cities Part 1. Another update on the sales side, last month you made the decision to allow me to enter into negotiations for the sale of 24 Hamilton Street. The first part of that was to enter into a license agreement with the potential buyers so they can walk through the house with their architect and their engineer and anyone else who needs to take a look at the building. That was signed on the 17th of this month and it's for 90 days. So I will have updates every month, but for the time being, the updates are that the investigation is ongoing and it will move into contract. But of course, that'd be something I bring back to the board when the contract gets, when the license agreement gets closer to having resolved all the issues that they want to investigate, then we would look towards the contract. Funding updates. I don't believe Erica is on, but I wanted to give her a big shout out. Last month, I had said the enterprise funding to finish up our pilot of $325,000. Maybe that's her. Oh, maybe not. So that has been received. So thank you, Erica, wherever you are, for working with me and enterprise to secure that funding. The Legacy Cities subsidy grant, the first tranche has been funded. So that's great and on schedule. We're anticipating probably next month to receive the second and final tranche of the Legacy Cities subsidy money. As Daniel mentioned, the ARPA stimulus funding is a big deal. It's $1.1 million. There was the meeting on the 21st with the council. The council held with the general public. And as Daniel said, almost every member of the council spoke out in favor. In particular, Councilmember Muhammad, who is our liaison, she spoke very strongly in support of the land bank's work. So thank you to her for that. And thanks to all the board members who reached out. Nate was instrumental, Minnie was instrumental. Everybody else was probably instrumental too, but it seems like we have the support that we need in a good way. And we got a lot of real-time feedback and answered some questions along the way. So I think it was very helpful. I think the vote might take place on the 5th. The council might vote to approve the city's proposal for the ARPA funding. I'm not sure on that, but we should have some more updates next month based on that. Finally, under my funding updates, we will talk more after I stop rambling about the Kingston Housing Opportunity Fund, for which Mark and Esther are here to speak with us on that. I'll give a little intro, Esther and Mark, before we jump in, just kind of how we got here and all that. But I'm very excited to be at this point to present to you what this could look like. And just so you know, if you haven't seen it, the application and the program description are in your board package. So finally is other. That's where I throw everything in there. For onboarding, there's one thing left where Jeannie, I need your bio.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. That's the last piece.
I'm hooking up with my partner this week, so we'll get that done.
Okay, thanks very much. And then right behind that, no, it's okay. Because right behind that, we're going to have team photos. I'm setting that up with Veronica. I'm sorry, I can't remember your last name, who worked with us at the ribbon cutting ceremony to do the photos. She's super excited. She wants to work with us on location that makes sense. Maybe one of our buildings under construction, maybe, I don't know, but I will try to get some dates on people's calendars over the next month or so and probably do a doodle poll, and then we can have fun doing that. Also, ABO training, as Minya informed me, you do have a year as a new board member to complete your ABO training, but if you have done so, thank you. If you haven't, please just keep it on your radar to try to get that taken care of in the next 10 months or so. But it's my understanding from board members who've gone through it, it's not incredibly arduous. It does take approximately maybe an hour or so to do it. 2?
Like an hour and a half.
Okay, takes a little while, but thank you for that. Also, I had mentioned last month that Nikon, which we are now a new member of, is having their annual meeting in May. If you're interested in attending that, somewhere in your inbox is an invite for that. That's just their annual conference. They do sometimes have in-person meetings. They obviously haven't for the past 2 years, but it culminates in one at Mohawk Mountain House, which is, if you haven't been there, is a really kind of special, unique place here. But also from Nikon this month, it'll be talked more about it. The fundraising section is a sample strat plan framework, just to kind of lend some more examples to that conversation when we get there. So just another example of things that Nikon does and how they help support various nonprofits throughout the state. Also, the New York Land Bank Association is talking about, and they probably will be holding their annual event for Erica, Owen, Kyle, and myself to probably attend on the 8th and 9th and possibly the morning of the 10th of June. So more to come on that. It will be in Syracuse. Depending on what it looks like with the Legacy Cities closing, it may not be something that I'm able to go to the whole thing, but I'm excited to go out and represent the land bank amongst other land banks and other groups working with vacant and foreclosed houses. More to come on that, but I believe that's happening early June. And then finally, I've said this maybe every 30 days and then every 6 months, if the governor doesn't extend her order, again, we may have to go back to in-person meetings in a month. So to be continued on that. We do have a space reserved in conference room number 2 in City Hall. And if that did happen, I would just flip the invite over to say, this is the new meeting place and see you there. And so to be continued on that, but it happens about every month. So we'll see. That's it. Cool. So next item on the agenda, if I could, is our guest presentation. Esther Sandroff and Mark Yar are with Forsyth Street Advisors, the nationally recognized premier firm dealing with municipal bond consulting, affordable housing consulting, and probably a bunch of other things that I won't try to stumble through. It's been my pleasure to work with them, full transparency, in various parts of my career, throughout my career. And for the board's awareness, for some context, about a year ago, I believe, Daniel and I had a conversation directly with Novo about the concept of trying to produce more affordable housing than maybe we could just by directly renovating the homes and doing that with some direct grant funding, which was a concept that they appreciated. They want us to flesh that out by working with a third-party consultant, not something that we put together ourselves, but they wanted to have that that awareness brought to them with people with honestly more experience and skills than just our limited experience here in Kingston, but making it Kingston-centric and drilling down into the real issues that are here. We then passed a budget last year in August that allowed for allocating funding to work with a consultant, for which we put out a public RFP, for which we selected Forsyth Street, and we began working with them. It was supposed to be in January, but it was actually in December. So it's been my pleasure to be working with Esther and Mark for approximately the last 4.5 months. And for specific context, as we were going through this process, we had that Pathway 3 RFP that we did for as-is buildings. And 108, 110 Henry Street was one that stuck out to really need something like this program. There were several respondents who didn't really seem to have the capacity to do all the due diligence that one would have to do for a complex acquisition like this. And this program in many different ways seeks to kind of meet people where they're at in that process. And I won't steal any more of the summary or the thunder, but that's my intro. And thank you very much, Esther and Mark, for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Esther, I'm going to
I'm
hand
sorry.
you.
Yep. Okay, Mark, I'll do what I can do, and if you think I'm missing something, please
Okay.
chime in. I'm gonna share the screen now. Please tell me if you can see. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. And you'll notice in the picture there are trees with leaves on them, and that's an optimistic view of the future that we're going to see within the month, I'm hoping. So just to give you a framework, first a little background about Forsyth Street, just a little more than Mike said, not much more. We're a consulting firm. We're based in New York City, although we have an office in San Francisco, and we started doing affordable housing consulting work in New York City. And we've been involved in also creating some acquisition funds in New York City first, and then eventually we've been branching out, and we've done a lot of both affordable housing consulting work and fund work in other parts of the country. We have a lot of activity right now on the West Coast, in the Bay Area, and we've done some work in Los Angeles and continue to do so. And then we have clients in various other places, but we're pretty New York State and New York City oriented. And I'll just very briefly touch on our engagement. We did some work around the landscape, just mainly for our purposes, because we had to learn what the land bank was doing in order to come up with an idea, a conceptualization of what we thought made sense. And then the housing challenge, which I'm sure all of you are aware of the housing challenge in Kingston, but I'll briefly touch on it, and then we'll just dive right in to the Kingston Housing Opportunity Fund, which we're proposing. So once again, we were hired a couple of months ago. We did an internal review. We're going to look a little bit at the landscape, and then we're going to go right into the program design. That was a little redundant, I realize. First, the landscape. And you're all aware of this, but just it's worth saying that Kingston is in Ulster County, and it's a very different kind of place than the rest of Ulster County. I was surprised. Ulster County's population has been declining, but Kingston's in the last 10 years has grown, which for New York State is good, because New York State population has been sort of holding steady, if not declining. But Kingston is seeing growth. It's different than Ulster County in a lot of ways. It's way more diverse. It's got a larger non-white population, more immigrants. It's got more renter households. It's got some more low income population. So it's a place that stands apart from Ulster County. And just to state what I view as the housing challenge in Kingston, and it's obviously more complex than this, but it's primarily a single family market. Housing stock is very old. In fact, it's wonderfully old. And that's one of its charms, but it's also a challenge, because the housing stock that the land bank is focusing on is a housing stock that needs a lot of TLC, which is expensive and complicated. In some ways it's easier just to tear down a house and put up a prefab, but we don't want to do that in Kingston if we don't have to. So we want to deal with its complexity and its historic beauty, and bring it back to its glory, and allow people in Kingston to all continue to live here. There's been a lot of pressure on home prices, and that's put home ownership out of the reach of many Kingston families, and that's the challenge that the Kingston City Land Bank has been stepping up to. But on top of that, because it's primarily a single family market, and a lot of the rental housing stock in the city are single family homes, there's also a lot of pressure of converting rental units into home ownership and short-term rental units. So not only is home ownership out of reach, but there's, I think if you move the clock forward 10 years to the next census, or you don't even have to do that, what you'd find is that there's going to be a loss of rental housing in Kingston that is going to be inexorable, and that's something that has to be dealt with. I don't know if that's completely the responsibility of the Kingston City Land Bank, but it's an issue that the city of Kingston is going to have to confront, and Ulster County is going to have to confront as well. And finally, the city is a relatively small city, and they really lack the infrastructure to address the affordable housing crisis, which has really accelerated in the last 2 years, as we know. And I was trying to find some stats on how what's happened. And this, I think, was the best illustration. If you look at cities around New York State and you look at Kingston, you see that the average house price in Kingston has gone up about $100,000 in less than 2 years, which is unheard of. That's a serious issue. And luckily, the Kingston City Land Bank is poised to try to help. And we're hoping that this proposal will contribute to helping the Kingston City Land Bank address these challenges. And I just put this picture up because I love the picture of all the little houses that are in there, the ones that have been sold. They're beautifully renovated. There's a pipeline of houses. I know that, as we've heard, some of them are facing some challenges. Others are moving along through the pipeline relatively smoothly, and it's a great story. And what we'd like to do is help the Kingston City Land Bank to increase their ability to do what they do, and that's what we're working toward here. Here are the challenges for the Kingston City Land Bank and why we think this housing opportunity fund is needed. There's market pressure of property values, as we mentioned. There's title issues, which Mike has been dealing with the city, and hopefully there'll be an opening, and it'll become easier to convey these properties in the future. And then there's the age and condition of the stock. As I mentioned, it's a lot of really old houses. And then there's the question of developer contractor capacity. As Mike mentioned, there was a property that it was an effort to convey a property within the last few months that ran up against the obstacle of developer capacity, particularly in the pre-development phase. And one of the things about converting single-family homes into home ownership and rental opportunities is that it's the domain of smaller developers. And it would be one of the goals here is to find a way to create opportunities for emerging developers, women-owned BIPOC construction companies to actually get into this market and to participate in allowing these houses to be conveyed as affordable housing. And that's really where we'd like to see this go. So let's talk about the Kingston Housing Opportunity Fund. The idea of it is that you would capitalize a fund using philanthropy that would provide early stage pre-construction financing for affordable housing and other type of community projects in Kingston. Initially, the expectation is that it's mostly housing opportunities, but we'd like to see if it could remain flexible. I mean, there might be mixed income opportunities. There may even be some community facility opportunities that this fund could support. We'd like to see it targeted to minority and women-owned developers and contractors and small nonprofit developers who lack the access to capital in the early stage to get these projects across the finish line. We think this is complementary to what the Land Bank is doing, and it will hopefully help increase the volume of projects that can move through the pipeline, and it will support developers and contractors who are underserved by commercial capital markets. The eligible borrowers for this loan fund. So this is a loan fund. The Kingston City Land Bank would get money and they would then lend it out for pre-construction financing for small emerging developers and contractors. It would be minority and women-owned developers and contractors, small nonprofit developers, and potentially joint venture partnerships. One of the goals is to keep it as flexible as possible. Targeted project types, obviously existing 1 to 4 family homes, underutilized commercial buildings that might become available, and infill sites. And I noticed that you do have an infill site that you're trying to move through your pipeline. So I'm interested to see what happens with that. One of the foundations of this program is that if you're going to access this funding, you have to commit to building housing that is affordable to people earning up to 80% of the AMI, which is what the Kingston City Land Bank, that's the policy, and that's this program would support that policy. Down the line, the housing might be available for capital subsidies to reduce the carrying costs to purchasers and renters. For example, the Legacy Cities program. There may be other programs coming down the pike, but the idea is that their subsidies may be available for these houses. And like other Kingston City Land Bank projects, the projects that are produced through this program will be subject to an enforcement mortgage or regulatory agreement to protect long-term affordability. And that's key. There's a whole bunch of terms, and I think we sent around a sort of a packet of material about the terms of the loans. And this is still, we're still working through some of the details, but on a preliminary basis, the loan size would be less than 100,000 per dwelling unit. These would be 12-month loans approximately, although extensions would be possible at an interest rate, which we're now pegging at 5%. These are all terms that are still to be worked out. And the source of repayment for these loans would be construction financing. So a developer who is either buying a house on the market or buying a house through the Kingston Land Bank would be able to come and borrow pre-development financing that would be used to do environmental work, to make sure that the foundation could support the house, to get the plans worked out, to get everything prepared so that they could apply for construction financing. And the application process for this program would be that the borrowers would submit an application package, and these loan applications would either be submitted as part of a land bank RFP to purchase and develop a land bank property, or in some cases, the owner would come to the land bank and say, I want to make a bid on a house that's for sale, and I want to convert it into an affordable home ownership or rental property, but I need some extra money to get me over the finish line to get to construction financing. So it doesn't have to go through, there are different pathways to get to the finish line, which is to create affordable housing. And there's an application package, which you all should have copies of. And I will make this presentation available so you and everyone will get a copy of this as well. The role, just to be clear about how this program works, this is pre-development financing. So this is initial money that goes into the development process before construction begins. And it's taken out by the construction loan. So when the developer or builder gets a construction loan, this loan gets paid off. The money goes back to the Kingston City Land Bank, to this fund, and they can re-lend it. And that's one of the great things about this program, is that if you have philanthropic money, often that money just goes into a deal and it's in the deal, and that's it. You know, if it's a subsidy, like a capital subsidy on a development project. But with a revolving loan fund like this, the money goes into the deal. It helps move the process through the move the project through the pipeline. The money comes back in and it can be re-loaned. So you have a certain kind of a leverage that occurs, rather than just doing 5 houses in 10 years. You can do maybe 20 houses in 10 years or 25. So you really, you optimize and you magnify the impact that you can have with the same amount of money. We did a little bit of math preliminarily. If we were able to raise $1 million over 10 years, that could represent about $4 million in cumulative lending activity. You could support as many as 50 or 54 home renovations. It's like a 4-to-1 leverage, because you're just revolving that money over a 10-year period. One of the other benefits of a program like this is that there are fees and interest that is charged that goes to the Kingston City Land Bank, so that the money, and I wrote KCLF, I realize that should be B. So this is actually a revenue source. It's become self-supporting for the land bank. And cumulatively, if you know, assuming that, you know, these, based on the assumptions we have here, this could represent about over $300,000 in earnings to support the activity of the Kingston City Land Bank. So program highlights, and then I'm going to open it up and see if anybody has any questions. It's a revolving loan fund, so the impact is multiplied. It's complementary to what the land bank is already doing. It amplifies what the land bank is already doing. It's available for any transaction in the market as long as it's associated with affordable housing or community benefit. It's targeted to MWBE developers, contractors, so it helps build capacity and experience for emerging developers who might need a leg up. And it's a source of recurring revenue to support the activities of the Kingston City Land Bank. So that's the end of my presentation. I guess if anybody has any questions, be happy to try to answer.
Well, gosh, thank you. Oh, welcome, Nate. I have some questions, but
Okay.
I don't know. Okay. Thank you so much. Obviously, this was a lot of work. I know you guys have been working on it for months, so very exciting to see, and this is awesome. Are you envisioning it as limited to minority and women-owned businesses, or preference for the, like?
Esther, could I, hi, this is
Go
Mark.
ahead.
That's a decision for the land bank and its board to make, not a decision of the consultants to make. You need, you know, this is a proposal. It provides the contours of such a fund, but there are a lot of policy decisions that are embedded in this proposal, and it's the board that has to make a decision like that. Obviously, it could be available to any developer who's working within the land bank's territory. It's up to the board to make that decision.
I guess
I would add one thing, as I understand it, the legacy cities has a priority. I don't know if it's in the legislation, but I think from HCR standpoint, there is a priority to work with MWBs, with minority and women business-owned enterprises, and so secondarily with nonprofits.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I guess the root of my question is basically like, it seems like this is a really, really good way to get younger people starting out in this business into doing this type of work. And so I would be hesitant to, while I fully support and understand the need for preference, I would also be cautious about limiting it.
You want to be flexible. Flexibility is important.
For the disbursement requests, it says as they arise. In your view, is that after the expenses incurred, or?
Yeah, I mean, typically, from pre-development standpoint, someone needs to hire an architect. They go out and hire an architect. The architect is subject to a contract, and this X amount is advanced at the point they're completed X percentage of the plans, things like that. You need an environmental review. Again, in some instances, let us say let's say you need an environmental review, you need a phase one, and the company says, well, we want to be paid in advance. We want a down payment in advance for doing the phase one. Well, then probably what you would want to see is an executed contract to do the phase one. And then based on that, you would make an advance to the borrower. So it might vary a little differently depending on the nature of the work to be done as to whether you advance day one or you advance in
retrospect,
Okay, yeah, because I get kind of on the same note, like I think a major challenge for so many smaller businesses is just not having the capital that they can outlay in advance.
And this
Absolutely.
fund to relieve small developers with the burden of having advanced monies that they don't have.
Right. Especially because, like, if they were doing this some other way, they may not get a phase one, or they may not get an
Right.
environment. Or
Yep.
Right.
like we're, by participating in this, we're also driving up their costs. So
And hopefully driving up the quality of the work that gets done
in
and
theory, yes, that's also true.
right.
And then you had mentioned the possibility of somebody like potentially coming to us saying, hey, a property is on the market. Is there anything in your view that would prevent somebody who maybe already owns a property but would like to convert it to affordable, but they need X amount to rehab it in order to do that?
To the board. It's a board
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah. I
Could
mean,
be-
there's sort of, if they qualify for the program and they're going to put it into affordability, the board can say, yes, that's fine. If somebody owns a property and they want to turn it over into affordable housing, it's your choice.
Cool. Well, I'll shut up, but thank you. Oh my goodness.
Oh, excellent questions. Thank you.
Exciting. Thank you guys so much.
Anybody else have questions?
Could I ask about the market gap that this is potentially filling? I mean,
Sure.
do you have any, I mean, perhaps we all have some anecdotal evidence, right? But I'm just wondering if you have any evidence of the gap that this would be filling regionally.
This is an interesting niche in the market. I mean, it's a very small scale. These are small scale projects. So there are a lot, bigger developers are not, and bigger developers are looking to make a profit. I mean, you're looking for a certain kind of developer who wants to produce affordable housing. And some of those might be, maybe there's an opportunity for a nonprofit to arise that would be a nonprofit home ownership developer that would come along, or, we do know that there are a lot of pathways to becoming contractors and developers are closed to people. There are a lot of barriers to entry in that business, and it's a business that can be very lucrative for people to get into, but it's hard to get into it. And one of the benefits of a program like this is that it hopefully opens up opportunities. There may even be some apprenticeship opportunities that could come as a result of a program like this, where you can bring in young people to learn the building trades. I don't know if that answered your question. I think that Mike had mentioned that there was one of the projects that you had tried to RFP ran into this problem.
I think all of them do to some extent.
It's a tough business.
It is. And I think, sorry.
No, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, do you think that once this is, out into the public, that people will be knocking, on our doors, so to speak? Or will it be more of a explaining what this is, right? Spreading the word. And I'm just curious if you have any experience on that front.
There's probably a certain amount of marketing that will have to be done of the fund and its availability and the terms and conditions. But there are some people who, won't require much prompting. But you'll have to announce it. You'll have to market it, and then you'll see who comes forward.
I mean, it's still a tough business. It's not like this is easy money and, everywhere. Or if this was an easy business, then there'd be affordable housing being built everywhere, right?
But the fund is the one thing. The fund is, at least partially the way we've conceived it, is that the fund is linked to, the issuance in some instances of RFPs by the land bank for particular properties. So somebody then says, I'd love to compete for that property, but I don't know how I'm going to finance all the costs to get it to construction loan closing. And so this becomes a tool that will enable some people to compete for properties that the land bank is offering who otherwise couldn't. They wouldn't be in a position. They would say, I don't have the capital. I don't have the resources to move this project along. Does that make sense? So it's inherent in that linkage that you have the marketing of the fund itself.
I've got a quick question. Finding competent MBEWB contractors, can always be a challenge. Or
Yep.
has always been a challenge.
Yep.
And opening it up to every contractor, small contractor, is an interesting concept, and I think it would probably be necessary. But one of my concerns is how do you vet contractors? How do you vet contractors who will apply for these funds so that we don't end up with defaulted contractors, which would, sap the fund and not be a great idea.
Right.
Any thoughts on that?
We put together, if you look at the package, we put together some criteria that you would have to look at, and the board would have to decide how you vet these folks. And look, there's no fund. This is at-risk money. So there is the possibility that there will be some projects that won't go forward, and maybe even for good reasons. I mean, you might want to put an option on a house and then find out that the foundation is not stable or something, so that there are possibilities that some of this money will not get returned to the land bank. But I think that what's important is to put out a vetting process, and that we'll work with Mike to come up with a process that we think is reasonable to identify developers that have the capacity to bring these projects to completion.
Yeah, I think you'd want to look at, do they have prior experience? But you have to decide where you set the bar. Any liquidity. I mean, do they have some cash to put into the loan? So that they have, as they call it, skin in the game. So there are a whole series of criteria, and then the question that could be established, the question again is, how high do you want to set the bar?
Right. I mean, we want to make sure that the money gets on the street, and you're still, I mean, with a lot of philanthropic money, the money goes out the door and it's out the door. But in this case, in reasonable expectation is that some of that money, probably a lot of it, will come back to be reloaned again.
Yeah.
So I have a question that might be for the two of you, and thank you again for all of this information. And it might also be for Mike a little bit as well, which is trying to think through kind of, as you were talking, think through various use scenarios of, as I think all of us were for this loan, and the one that we've kind of experienced already, where, as Mike mentioned, where this might have been applicable was the disposition of this as-is property, the Henry Street property. And one of the issues that we saw, in addition to just that the applicants didn't really have sufficient experience to kind of demonstrate that they could rehab the property, that the proposed rents for the people who wanted to do it as rental properties, the proposed rents were not really affordable for the city of Kingston. And so, currently in Kingston, there's us, there's, the elephant in the room, which is Rupco, the elephant, I don't know, the behemoth in the area in terms of affordable housing development. But there's no, and there's the possibility of other nonprofits being developed, being created over the years. But at the moment, that's really it in terms of nonprofit development in Kingston. Is there any, I don't know if it's just like a draft underwriting, is there any proof that without capital subsidy, something can be, a two-family property like Henry Street can be kind of rehabbed?
Right. And so
an AMI? Like, do we know that?
A
I guess
rental.
that was a question I was wondering.
Depends on how much you pay for it and how much
Yeah.
rehab you need to do. I mean, there are a lot of, and the standard of rehab. I
Of
mean,
course, yeah.
you guys have the work that you've done on these few houses that you've sold is probably a higher quality than market rate contractors are converting houses for and selling them for $1 million in Kingston. It's really, they're beautiful. You may not be able to achieve that kind of, you can't achieve those kind of low rents without a lot of subsidy at that level of finish, I think. But who knows? Depends on how much you buy it for.
Yeah.
I could just interject to that point. There was one thing that we discussed in the planning for this, and kind of mapping out the scenarios and the target population and the target opportunity. It really is the pipeline from the city of Kingston. And we're currently working on properties that have sat vacant for decades, and the goal is to accelerate that timeline for properties that have unfortunately been foreclosed on due to back taxes to become immediately available for redevelopment. So we hope that those incredible costs that we're seeing and the deterioration is not as prevalent in properties that we might offer to dovetail with this. And that's the hope. But
the other thing is that, I mean, you could work, if you had a really a higher volume effort going forward, you might be able to go to HCR and say, look, we need some relief on this. Let's get some subsidy in here because we're doing something which I think other cities in New York State are also interested in figuring out how to do. Take single family houses and scattered site houses and make them feasible as affordable rental. So this might be a model that the city, that the state is interested in looking at and helping you to figure out.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's all helpful. Thank you.
I feel kind of stupid. Can I go back a beat, a bunch of beats? So sorry, is the loan just to get them to the point where they can qualify for a construction loan through a traditional financial institution?
That's correct.
Yeah. That's how this is conceived of. Probably I've seen instances where some portion of a loan is left in during construction and then taken out by the permanent financing. But if you leave the monies in beyond the construction period to the permanent financing, then that's money out the door that will not come back to you for a long time, if ever. So this is designed to, as Esther said, revolve the monies.
Right. The other thing though, the other reason why you'd want to put the money in early, and one of the ways to think about using the money is to help give you time to apply for subsidies. It's
Right.
not just to make sure that the foundation is okay and that there's not too much lead and that you have design plans, but also the process of trying to get public subsidies can be lengthy and can be complicated. So this gives the builder some breathing room to sort of figure out how to finance these projects. So some of the takeout might come from other type of sources. In that case, it may be that there's some permanent money that comes after the construction period, after a year or two, and you could get repaid, even if you left a little of the money during the construction period, in theory.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just trying to think through it in terms of trying to serve people who either don't have a very long track record in business or don't have a lot of assets, or all of the reasons that people have difficulty securing financing. If this solves that kind of as
Well,
much as we would.
Good question. I think there's a certain amount of hand-holding that has to go on in this process. And as Esther said, it allows someone to start the work of, that'll get them to construction loan closing, but also open up the door for people, including the land bank itself, to start trying to help secure the necessary subsidies from the state. Fundamentally, that's who it's going to come from HCR, to ensure that the deal can be done. But it's hard to do that day one. And to the extent that the work is underway, architectural plans, things like that can be provided to the state. Perhaps it increases the feasibility, the possibility that the necessary support will come from HCR for the deal or set of deals that are being done. I think Mike's more familiar with that process than I am, although I know people at HCR. But
just bang your head against a table for about a year, and then you have a closing.
Right. Yeah.
Sounds right.
Mike, in your mind, does this, to start executing this, would we hire an additional grants manager, somebody in-house to help them go out and find additional subsidy and work through this process with
I think what we should do is take a measured approach with trying to see what works with existing resources that we have. The next step, by the way, would be to take this to Novo for some additional feedback and tailoring to fit with a fundable initiative. I know that there are, I'll call you out, Erica. I believe Erica has hired a grants manager that we've talked about this in various contexts before. So that would be like a phase 2 sort of check and balance as like a backstop potentially. And it's not the case that I don't think we should try it because we would be expecting to have 10 or 15 of these going on at once. I think we should take a measured approach. We should be very clear and distinct about what the criteria are that we're trying, just like we did with the pilot, and maybe tighten it up a little bit as we go further based on experience. But I don't think we would have to add any additional resources to launch it. Cool. All right, well, thank you both so much for giving this presentation. You're welcome to stay on for the rest of the board meeting if you like, and understand if you have a conflict, then you can.
Thank you, but we'll let you do your meeting and we'll talk. And thank you all for listening, and let us know if you have any questions, and Mike will get you the presentation. He'll email it to you. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Okay. Thank you. Exciting. All right. Committee reports. Just time check. It's 7:30. So let's try to move fast. Bob, ADC.
Be very fast. How's that? We did have a long conversation. There's 3 things on the agenda, and I'll address them quickly, and then we'll go from there. The Franklin Street schedule, we looked at opportunities to do with that as a GC. Still in conversation. We're moving forward with the purchasing and the roof, and we'll see where that goes. And the idea around us being the GC, the insurance issues got to be quite an issue. So we'll have to talk about that further. We looked at emergency repairs for 111 Downs. You talked about that earlier, about the garage. I toured the house. It's an interesting house. You know, if I was rich, I could buy that house and rebuild it. It was quite something in its time. But its time has passed, obviously. That's not a good thing. But the details are great in that house. I think a tour would be wonderful. Greenkill AMI, we decided to recommend to the board that we sell Greenkill at a 90% of the AMI. Is that correct? That's what my note says, and I hope I'm correct with that. So I guess, do we need a board action to do that? Or are we just going to do it? We'll just do it. Yeah, okay. So just by way of awareness, we're going to market that at 90% of AMI, which falls within the realm of the others that we have sold at various AMIs. 90 is the highest, I guess, right, that we've ever done, but we really need to recover that. So, and given its location, we think that's a reasonable thing to do. In your packet, there's revisions to the disposition policy. And I'm sure everybody had a chance to read them. I read them. So I think we probably should take a vote on whether we should adopt the changes to the disposition policy that were in your packet. So I'll leave it to Daniel to ask for a motion and a second and a vote, given that he's the chair. How's that?
Bob, would you like to maybe elaborate what the differences are and why we did them?
I'd probably turn to Mike. I'd turn to Mike for that. Mike,
Mike, would you like to elaborate on?
I would be happy to. Thank you. The only change to the disposition policy is the removal of a no longer relevant state reporting requirement that we discovered through the New York Land Bank Association this month is no longer valid. So all land banks are taking it out of their disposition policy. That's the change.
It also increases the membership to 5.
I think that may have been in the committee charters,
right.
But it's in there. It's in this month's board package.
Okay.
Sure.
So that's the revision to the disposition policy.
Are there any questions or comments about that? What basically happens is all the land banks use the same disposition policy and then mess with it. So when something changes, we all have to change it because we all use the same source material, basically. So I'll entertain a motion to revise our disposition policy.
I'll make the motion. How's that?
I have a motion. Need a second.
Seconded.
All in favor of amending our disposition policy as proposed? Aye. Abstain? Was it unanimous? Okay, motion passes. Sorry, Erin, I didn't see your hand. Okay.
So
Wow.
that's it. That's all we got.
Okay, finance and audit. Nate, welcome to the board meeting.
Hi, sorry I was late, everyone.
You're
Had
good.
a couple of things come up. Erica, I don't know if you want to go over.
Say, did
It
you want me
always
to-
like defers to me, but then like you go over the report, so I don't know why we always
Well,
do that dance. But
No, I'm happy to take them over. I mean, I feel like it's only been, this is now the second one, and when you feel comfortable to take the lead on that, we'll transition.
cool. All right, maybe for the next one, and then I'll get more up to speed. But I don't think there were any huge updates in the most recent financial report anyway. So this, but
There weren't. So we had, we received the $325,000 from Enterprise in this month. There was very nominal expenses with the exception of one of our payments for 149 Greenkill and a bill for demo on 124 Franklin Street. Other than that, the activity was very low. And again, it's kind of because it's the start of the year. We'll see more activity as the projects increase and we'll have more to report, but it's not that exciting. And then we are still in the process of audit. We are waiting to hear back when the audit will be completed, but I do want to inform the board that it will not be done before March 31st. That's,
Does anything bad happen to us if it's not done before March 31st?
no. So
Okay.
it is the deadline for the submission of the ABO, and that is the final item that is required to be submitted. However, in my experience with municipalities and doing municipal audits as an auditor, none of them have submitted on time or within the future months. So it was like months later. And then with last year's, regular, I guess, communication because of COVID, they provided an extension. So they still encourage it. And obviously you want to make sure that we are staying on top of it and not kind of losing sight of a deadline. But they do understand that you cannot control the audit.
Okay.
So, sometimes they may come back and ask if it's significantly late and there's significant changes within the organization. So had we been an established organization with tons of investments and more intricate, I guess, reporting, then they may ask for an explanation. We just want to make sure that we're getting ahead of it year over year and we get closer and closer to that timeline.
Good, thank you. And I want to know, are you cured or recovered from your crash and playing the piano again?
I'm happy to show you guys that I don't have my brace on today and I can move my fingers. But I cannot move my wrist. So not yet, but baby steps. And thank you for asking. 8 screws later, Bob. I'm a robot.
We're so thrilled to have a bionic consultant on board. Great. Oh, so we have shall I call for a vote on the accepting the treasurer's report? Are we there? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to accept the treasurer's report.
Motion to, well, can I move on my own? I just sorted my own report.
I say yes.
All
So
right, motion to accept the treasurer's report.
Second.
all in favor of accepting our monthly treasurer's report? Oppose, abstain, motion passes unanimously, pretty sure. Cool. Okay. Fundraising. Aaron, take it away.
In terms of actual kind of nuts and bolts direct fundraising, I don't have much to report. I know the fundraising committee is everyone is actively kind of starting conversations with local property owners, business owners, residents, just starting to get the word out there and start conversations. So I think maybe next month we'll have some kind of real updates, but for now, I know everybody is working hard. The only other real update is that Mike has really been taking the lead on kind of on pushing to get us to. Sorry, I'm out of it, not speaking clearly. Continuing to the strategic plan efforts that we initially discussed last month after Mike and I met with the Dyson Foundation to discuss a grant opportunity. So in the past 2 weeks or so, we've met with 3 different consultants to discuss the land bank, the range of options that a strategic planning process can include and what their different approaches are. And they're all 3 organizations are preparing proposals for us to review. There's, I think Mike and I each have our own preferences based on the conversation so far, but it's also somewhat is going to have to do with it's somewhat based on the groups, and some of the consideration is financial because of the terms of what Dyson might be willing to pay. Anyways, included in the board packets was an initial kind of menu of options that Nikon sends out to show kind of what a strategic plan process can be like. For everyone to review. I don't know if Mike, there was anything else you wanted to say about it at this point. I feel like we're kind of just going to have a couple more conversations with other people, other consultants, and then go from there.
The only thing I would mention, just to underscore your point about working with the Dyson Foundation, is that typically these consultants are used to working with the Dyson Foundation, and Dyson, I believe, historically covers all or a vast majority of the cost, and so this is not a significant KCLB expense. It's more of just having found a donor to sponsor this work. So that was it.
And I'll just say personally, it's been great having the conversations, just like asking questions of these people. I've never been through a strategic plan initiative. I think Mike has been through a few with different groups he's worked with over the years, but it has made me start to think through about 1,000 questions that I want to ask with all of you. So I look forward to doing the process with you when we get there. And that's really all I have for fundraising.
Thank you. But Barta, wait, who's chair of comms now?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Completely fine. I have to apologize. I'm a bit under the weather right now with an ear infection thing happening. So bear with me. So we appointed me as chair. That's one of our things. Some of the things have already been gone over in other committee reports. but we discussed, we're still in the process of narrowing down our process of the ambassador program. We are, I guess we're still scheduling a meeting right now with Shannon Snow, just who has previous experience with a project like this, just to get her feedback on the best way. We're sort of caught in a discussion between stipend compensation and the best approach to do that right now, and just basically what would work best for the ambassador and how we're going to still set up that program. We discussed creating social media promo videos, getting those set up and running mainly for Instagram. And we're still in the process of trying to find a way to have somebody edit a vast amount of footage within a reasonable budget right now. I believe we've been proposed for somebody else proposed doing this project for us, but it was outside of our budget. And right now, at this moment, we're still trying to figure out if there's a person that will be willing to do that. And then we were talking about tracking targeted marketing for our campaigns right now, and we discussed getting a graphic representation of our reach from previous campaigns, and we got one from Kyle, I believe, who did a heat map, which was fantastic and was just exactly really helpful and something that we can is useful for just a reach of future projects. And we were talking about just trying to improve our outreach process, and some of that is hiring. And this will come to this in governance when we're trying to hire people who actually have been from the community and or lifelong members of the community. As William Drake will mention him in the next committee notes, but somebody that actually knows a lot of people too as well, just being able to improve outreach that way. Then and that's really basically it for now, unless I left something out. And part of that process is promoting Greenkill and Franklin as soon as possible. So we discussed the ARP funding in previous reports, and that's it for now. Oh, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Minya is one of the people who's been patiently waiting for me to get my act together. So thank you. Sorry, I'll get there, I promise. Okay. Governance. I don't know who's the chair of that either. It's also Minya. Oh, you poor thing. Okay. Off you go.
Yeah, so again, we appointed me as chair, and so we so that brings us to the appointment of the new board member to fill Julie's vacancy. And I had brought up, just because especially in the specific bylaws and charter we were talking about, diversity is specifically mentioned, and inclusiveness, and having a board that makes up a reflection of the community. And so I recommended we get some more reflection of the community on the board. And so that was, I had somebody in mind. They backed out the last minute, but then we had William Jake come on. He was part of the meeting in the beginning. He is a lifelong member of the Kingston community. He was a president of the state transportation union for 4 years, which, if my understanding, requires quite a bit of strength. And he was a volunteer firefighter for 15 years as well. And we interviewed him in the governance meeting. Everybody agreed that he would be a good addition to our board. And I've sent a message to Mayor Noble, a couple messages, just letting him know that that's our recommendation. And then we're also bringing it to the board for consideration. So we have to make a vote on that if everybody is in favor, I believe. And then this part of our meeting was also reviewing the bylaws to allow for 5 people to be max for each committee, and to vote on that, which we all agreed we thought was a good idea, and would recommend the committee vote yes on that. The board vote yes on that. And then in that is also changing the individual committees from binding to advisory. Which is also requires a vote, so that we would come up with the recommendations and basically what we're doing right now. And then we would vote to approve. And then there are some conflict of interest clause in the bylaws that we need to change. And I don't think there was anything we didn't agree that should go ahead and be changed that were in those bylaws, as far as I know, and in the charter. And so, miss anything?
But just to interject, Minion, I would suggest that I think I agree with everything you've said so far. In the code of ethics, in the financial disclosure form that is attached to the code of ethics, I would suggest that we dump the requirement that it be notarized. I think that doesn't add any value. I think it complicates life for everybody. And I think it's a good excuse for people not to get it done because I couldn't get it notarized.
Okay.
And it really doesn't, having a notary sign it doesn't mean you didn't lie, So I would suggest that that would be the only change that we make, is dump that notary requirement.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Bob. Then I think that was the other one was whether we would keep the chair as the board chair appointing committee leaders of the board. Is that it? Chairs, sorry.
Committee members.
Yeah,
So,
Dan, your main.
I went on a fun deep dive on that. I'm happy to.
Would you want to discuss that for?
Well, so we, in careful review of the bylaws, they are just as existing contradictory. It says that the board chair shall appoint members to the committee. However, when you go to the sections on the individual committees, it says that they are elected. It does not elaborate on how that election works. As the person who has served as chair, I could not care less how we do it. I don't specifically know how we would run an election. So that was my kind of I'm happy to change it. I just don't know logistically how to make that work. But that's the background on that. Oh, and just I have a question and a comment. Did William complete an application? Oh, okay, great. Has that been circulated?
It was sent out in the invite to the meeting, to interview when I sent it out to the board to join the interview that we had at 4:30, and his application is there. Yeah.
It's also on the spreadsheet, is it not? I think it is.
Yeah, it's on the spreadsheet. That's what I linked to.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I checked the spreadsheet, but I'm looking at probably a different spreadsheet. Bookmarked. We've had a lot of spreadsheets. No brag. But so in the past, at least, we have not done a board vote on recommending an appointment. So if the governance committee wants to make the recommendation to the mayor, that's all that we've done in the past.
Done.
It's his decision. So if that's been done, we will await the mayor's decision, but probably look very forward to welcoming William. So that's great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Daniel. So in the email sent Bartek did send out the code of ethics and conflict of interest, and the one that we already had, and I think we didn't realize, not everybody realized that existed that was preset. We have and then we have a financial disclosure form, and that is linked in my notes. It's also linked in email from Bartek, and this was for employees to submit conflict of interests if there's any money owed to city employees, as far as I understand. And basically we just need to do a review. People need to know that we have the code of ethics, conflict of interest. Go ahead, Mike, if you want to.
I just wanted to add to that a little bit of context about the prior way of doing the conflict of interest policy that's recommended as a change into the bylaws, which we're just reading this month. We won't vote until the following month on them. Is that it falls to the governance committee, as opposed to just one individual, which had previously been the secretary, who happens to also be on the governance committee currently. So it's a little bit of a shift in the direction of taking the conflict of interest policy for the board members to live with the governance committee, and then similarly, the conflict of interest policy related to non-board members, meaning myself, Erica, Owen, and Kyle, would fall to me. Then I would bring it to the governance committee unless it was a conflict that I had personally, and then I would bring it directly to the full board with awareness at the governance committee level. So those are just fun to highlight those other kind of nuance changes.
And sorry, is there a ethics officer, or the committee essentially is the ethics officer? Okay.
Yeah, that's my read of it is the chair, it goes to the chair of the ethics committee, chair of the governance committee, and then distributed from there. So it's all on Minya.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think just not often at all, but in the past, it has been helpful to have like a person who is sort of designated with that task, so that, because usually if you're coming with an ethics issue, it's sensitive and private and whatever. So Minya, congratulations, you're also
all right, thank you, Daniel and Mike. That's it for the governance committee. The only thing that we had wanted to discuss, we didn't exactly know where this would fit in. Is it a time to bring up the cultural competency training within that while we have it? And so this was brought up, and I just think it's probably generally a good idea. A common council member, one of the common council members, I had spoken to Michelle Hirsch. We had just discussed I just had reached out to her about the ARPA funding, and just to talk to her because she is so deeply involved in housing and affordable housing in the community, and for years she's worked with Family of Woodstock. And and this is an experience that I also had with a couple of community members that applied for previous houses, where they felt like the application process was somewhat the language was hurtful, what I would say, but in the sense that it just not, and I know this was unintentional, but just that it wasn't geared towards people who might be first-time home buyers or never have the chance before and might be going through that process. There's a different language for people when the history of with redlining, with basically systemic racism and the way financial institutions have treated people, that there's a certain amount of language changes that could be used in our application process, and even just ways to approach helping people get on board with the application process. So some of that comes from cultural competency training, which would be better to have somebody, either an organization come in and train us, especially even just with outreach with any board would do. I mean, I think it would be for everybody who would benefit from that kind of training overall. So it would, like just doing it in-house, I think it would be better to have someone from the outside that has experience with this to just help walk us through looking through our documents, our application process, and even give advice about how to go about it. And I believe we already have the funding for it. And so a vote isn't even required. It's just a matter of finding out how to make it, get that in process and get the training set for all of us, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person. That just came up today in a conversation I had with Mike and Daniel. So that I guess would fall within governance. I would say comms, not sure. So.
I didn't know either, but I swear I had it under my new business list. I didn't forget. Yeah, so Minya and Mike and I discussed this earlier. I think it's important and worthwhile and should be imminent. So I believe we have, you told me earlier and I forgot, I think $3,500 in our budget for board training. In the past, I don't think we've ever used our board training budget. So I think this is a extremely worthwhile way to do that. I don't have experience in board training or cultural competency training. So if you guys have any leads or resources or people you think would be smart to reach out to, even if it's not a direct recommendation, but they might know someone, let's talk so we can get this done, especially as we're gearing up for our next round of sales and marketing. Like if we're making changes to our applications and things, we should get on it. So thank you, Minya, for both for calling Michelle and for all the many different hats you're now wearing. And making it happen. Thank you. So we are voting on charter revisions for the committees to make them advisory rather than binding. The background there is when Mike joined, we realized, oh, we don't even have charters for the committees. So we drafted them, and Mike was brand new and he was asking me, which one should be advisory and which one should be binding. And I'm like, I don't know. And so we, what we have learned over time is we really treat all committees as advisory. We really don't make decisions in a vacuum of committees. The reason to do this now is because if a committee is binding, even if it does not have a quorum of the board, it is still subject to open meetings law. That makes a lot of sense, I think, for other types of commissions and things, but for a land bank that does regular advisory level kind of meetings, like it seems a little crazy. And since we're not making any decisions at those meetings, it really doesn't seem like it should fall under that. So just to sort of square up our policy with how we actually do stuff, that's why we're seeking to change the charters.
I mentioned one other thing, Daniel, is also increasing the number of members to 5.
Oh, right. Thank
That's the
you.
other change.
Yeah. Which is helpful for when more people want to be on a committee than 4, or to break ties.
Yep.
So, am I entertaining separate motions for these, or can we just do all 3 in one shot? Let's do all 3 in one shot. It's late. All right. So I will entertain a motion to revise the charters for the governance committee, the finance committee, and the acquisition, disposition, and construction committee to be changed from binding committees to advisory committees.
So moved.
Bob is seconded. All in favor of making that change to our charters? Oppose? Abstain? I think motion passes unanimously. I gotta come up with a better system before we're back in person. Maybe next time. All right. Design committee did not meet. It's been, oh, sorry, Minya, do we move on? Okay. Design committee did not meet this month. Well, that's only kind of true. Nate and I went around to almost all of the houses. I think we missed 2 on the legacy cities, but you saw Franklin and Greenkill and 3 of the legacy cities projects. That offer stands for any and all board members as well. Just let us know. Yeah, it's been a very busy month of just trying to get these legacy cities projects in line, and working with the architects and stuff. So there hasn't been a ton of time. We've been talking about sort of taking the first step on potentially rebranding, like doing a logo redesign. Part of that dovetails a little bit with fundraising, because it would be nice to have something that people might want to wear on a t-shirt or a mug or whatever, among other things. We just want to be cool, you guys. So that is something that we're starting to talk about. My brain is mush. Nate jump in. What have I missed?
I think that covers it, at least so far. You know, I think we have to start narrowing down the list of people we're looking at for the logo redesign, and yeah, I can't think of anything else. I think you covered it.
Cool. Yeah, I think I personally am learning a lot on the Greenkill project. So we have another design committee member who's not on the board, Jessica Farkas. She also worked on the Kingston Design Show House, or also known as 174 Hasbrook. So she's been a big support, and so she's sort of the lead designer in collaboration with the architects, with some oversight from me and also from Owen, and on that house. And it's been an interesting experience. She has done great and been really good at bearing with me on this sort of new way of doing things. So I'm learning a lot and have various ideas on sort of how to improve the model. I still think it's an exciting and worthwhile thing, but it's going to take some recalibration to get right, I guess is the point. That's my update there, I think. We have another public comments period, but I think we've lost all members of the public. So.
I'm still here.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna say that's Aneshka's. This is Aneshka's chance. Come
Like
on.
family.
This is when I talk about how I still am in the affordable housing conversation. Bartek, thank you for turning me on to Bonnie, who has apparently had conversations with Mike and is very encouraged by the fact that I think just like she does, and we're gonna eventually create a power team, I think. So watch out for that.
Say hello for me.
I will.
Bonnie Landis runs Youth Build.
She's pretty amazing.
Done that for close to 30 years now, I think.
Yeah, she's been doing the youth build since 1996.
Yeah, and they restored in the 90s. They basically acquired all of Prospect Street and did like a bunch
Yes.
of houses. And so
Yeah, and that's all she wants to do. She wants to do that again.
it's kind of amazing. I
She
mean,
doesn't understand why people can't talk to each other in the city and work together. She doesn't understand it.
neither do I.
Long story.
Yeah, she's great. And for context, our house at 64 Van Buren was basically the corner of Prospect and Van Buren.
Oh,
Came,
wow.
those youth build houses from our beautiful newly constructed front porch. So
That's nice.
a lot of history in that neighborhood.
So keep rocking, you guys. You sound like you're doing incredibly well.
Thank you, Aneshka. All right. I have no new business, I don't think. Does anyone else? Okay. Bye. All right, then I guess we can vote to adjourn. I need a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor of adjourning March 2022's board meeting? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Have a wonderful month, everybody. I'll see you in committee meetings and stuff.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
All right.